Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIM Growth Partners podcast, the podcast where I am lucky enough to sit down with founders and leaders of innovative tech companies, including cybersecurity, emerging tech, and AI. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Stas, the founder of Predictio AI. And today, we're going to be talking about their Program Behaviour Intelligence company, which is first of its kind. Stas, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, David.
My pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into this episode because what you're building at the business is entirely different and not something we've not mentioned security at all in the name of the company and what you do. So I guess to give a super high level overview before we get stuck into the business, could you give the listeners a bit of an insight to yourself and your background, please, Stas?
My background, I started in industrial engineering, then moved into Macintosh peripherals. We had the first Macintosh peripherals company, and then worked with a financial company that was bought by Reuters, then worked with a company that was based out of Poland called the Polished Group. That was also bought by another public company, working with a lot of companies like Reuters, Sun Microsystems, Netscape, licensed some technology to Microsoft. So kind of interesting times.
You mentioned some pretty big names there. So I guess the first question is, what was it that sort of inspired you to embark on the entrepreneurial journey?
Initially, it was a big problem that I couldn't get security clearance in the US. I was not born in the US, but I was going to school here. My family was here. And at that time, there was a Cold War. And they said, look, we've got all these lovely Americans we can hire. And you were not born here. You've still got family in Eastern Europe. They're part of the Warsaw Pact. So it's not good. So I thought, well, if I can't get a job, I've got to go create my own job. And that's kind of how it started.
I love that. And so bring us up to the business you're kind of working on today. What does this program behavior intelligence actually mean?
It's a very good question. The idea behind this, we've been looking at in the security space, people are kind of reacting to problems. And it's a question of who can react faster and how can they spot the problem that has already happened. And our approach is slightly different. We said, wait a minute, let's try to understand what you're expecting the program to do or how the program is supposed to act, and just focusing on how the program is actually acting with a full context of the program. So we're not trying to protect the whole machine. We're trying to protect things on a program level. And program behavior intelligence is exactly that. We try to have the intelligence, how the program behaves, and then we can go and do something about it, make sure it's behaving as expected. Or in the supply chain, we can go and show you how the program is behaving and make sure that it's actually behaving in the way that you think it's supposed to be behaving, so that no malware, no Trojan horses pop in, either in third-party software or open source software, or even in something that could have happened from just a rogue programmer inside your company. And we've been looking at all these different North Koreans infiltrating companies, pretending to be good, decent programmers, and they're either doing a bad job or they're actually just running around planting malware and planting holes in software. And it's a big problem. And I think we've got a very different approach to a solution for this problem. We've got 2 patents now, and we've got a whole family of patents filed. And we feel this is something truly unique and can add a lot of value.
The cybersecurity industry as a whole is incredibly reactive and your solution's proactive. So that's a big paradigm shift. Talk to me a bit about that and, what it was that kind of instilled that belief or that thought in you that actually there's a way that we can do this better.
I think the big problem was exactly as you said. Everyone claims to be proactive. You read the marketing material and they say proactive. We found the problem within 20 seconds or 20 minutes or whatever it happens to be. But it just seemed that there was a different way of approaching this. And the approach was, maybe it didn't make sense before. Maybe it just wasn't feasible. Maybe somebody just didn't see it. They kind of plowed through a different way. But we've actually looked at it and said, wait a minute, it seems that really all we need to focus on, instead of this large infinite set of bad behavior, we can focus on this finite set of what's actually allowed. We know what the program is going to do before it does it, and we make sure that it actually is allowable. So it's almost, I think somebody once said, it's almost like pre-crime. Okay, it's the pre-crime, but it actually works. We're not taking innocent people away. It's the idea that we can sit there and say, we know what's happening and we can prevent it. And there are actually other companies that do prevent things, but they prevent things that are known. They can say, oh, we've seen this happen. We've seen this kind of an error before. This is the 0 day that happened 2 weeks ago. Here's our update to our threat feeds. And they do stop it, to be fair. I mean, those are, in that sense, they are preventing an error. Our approach is that by focusing on exactly what's expected, we can stop anything that's unexpected. A 0 day, no, not. We don't need any threat feeds. The only information we need, actually, we don't even need it because it's sitting on the client's machine, is how the customer expects the program to behave. And that's a transparent process that we call it through instant integration as they're running their software tests and their captive normal use, because not all software tests are complete. Our program sits there and transparently trains and builds a model of what is expected. So it's just a different approach.
And from what I understand from our previous conversations, you're using deterministic models rather than the more traditional kind of generative AI, the models that are kind of used there. Talk to me around that and the importance of having these deterministic models.
Again, the program model of expected behavior is, or the program model of behavior is, it's deterministic, it's auditable. We can show you exactly why that was built that way, which is very valuable in the sense that we're not going to have any hallucinations. We're not going to have any false positives. And if there is going to be a problem or something that was not captured initially in testing, we can show exactly why that problem happened, and not just that here's this endpoint of where the problem happened. We can show the full context of why that issue happened to begin with.
And presumably talking specifically about heavily regulated sort of industries and looking at those big enterprise customers generally, this is going to be a massive kind of added benefit to them, because from my understanding and from the conversations I've had on here, one of the big problems that kind of AI is posing is that lack of accountability, explainability. You mentioned hallucinations, which are causing all sorts of problems. Was that always the intention, behind this sort of model, being able to provide that extra layer of kind of compliance or security to these enterprise customers who need it most?
Not only was that maybe a factor, but the other factor was we cannot have hallucinations. We have to be absolutely precise about that. Yes, this is what we're expecting, and not that we're just guessing this is what we're expecting. If we're guessing, we can let something come through that shouldn't happen. And if it's not deterministic and auditable, then there's almost no value, because somebody will sit there and say, well, that wasn't allowed. Why? Because today's Tuesday. Okay. It's not, we want to make sure that anything that we say, somebody can actually sit there and understand, whether it's in the runtime protection or examining model behavior in development when they're looking and examining their supply chain.
Given the fact it's such a revolutionary solution you're kind of putting out there, what's the market feedback been like?
Initially, everybody says this is too good to be true. And then when they start delving into it, they realize that it's just a very different approach. It's a whole new layer of security. We're not saying throw out all the other layers. And they say this, a real good security posture should be multi-layered, and it should have every single possible layer that can protect. And I think the other feedback that we got was they're stunned by, everyone says frictionless integration or frictionless deployment, how actually frictionless it really was for them, and the value that it gave back of saying, okay, this test was not complete, or this test, here's some of the test cases that we found in captive normal use that you could create tests for, or something of this nature. And they found great value in understanding where the test cases were not complete and how they can make the test cases complete, and the protection, the idea of that we can protect them from the 0 days that they have seen, or 0 days that they're hoping we're going to protect them from in the future.
It sounds like that feedback's been incredibly positive then, that you're talking about. Have there been any sort of surprise pieces of feedback that maybe have altered the trajectory of the business, the positioning of the business, or how you kind of articulate your message or anything?
I think the one part of it was people realized that their testing cycle, some people realize that testing cycle is not complete, and they don't have the software hygiene that they really should have. And they saw this as an additional value in helping develop those test cases and those conditions that they should be actually looking for in the development space to make sure that in production it's going to be valid. So I think that was one thing. The other feedback was just that they were just very stunned at how truly frictionless it really happens to be.
Gotcha. And I think it's really interesting given how kind of disruptive your technology is. You're taking on potentially or displacing some quite big players in the space who have big marketing budgets. So as an early stage startup, how are you going to go about becoming this disruptive force in the space?
I do believe our approach is better. But again, I'm not saying throw out your old tools. I'm saying here's a new tool. And in this space, we don't really have time to stay with the old tools. We've got new approaches, new attacks happening. We've got AI-powered attacks. I think last week, Google said that some Chinese state actor did automated attacks against, where basically the AI was running all the attacks, exploiting everything with some minor human input, which is basically just go, go, go. We're at the stage where before we used to talk about 0 days, I think it's going to start, that time shift is going to start compressing to 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. And the reactive model is just going to be on the back foot. And for us, we're a different layer, a different approach. And we're not saying, hey, throw out all the other stuff and just trust us. Somebody may choose to do that in the future, but that's beside the point. This is just another way of solving the problem. In the old days, we had almost no security on nothing. Then we had some firewalls. Now we're having web firewalls. Now we're having, they keep on, these new layers happen to be added all the time. And we believe our approach is going to be something that can truly change and add a new layer of security to that software, and to make things behave as people expect them to without worrying about now reacting to some new attack.
I think it's interesting. Several guests I've had on the podcast have talked about, in this age of AI, you got to fight fire with fire. You need AI level kind of capabilities to detect and respond to these attacks. But it sounds like the way kind of conceptualizing the business is that extra kind of security layer. You're kind of operating on an entirely different level from that. It doesn't really matter what AI attacks are coming. You secured the business at the kind of the software level, not allowing things to happen that are anomalous or that could go wrong.
Spot on. We're again, by focusing on exactly what you expect your software to be doing, we're not going to allow the software to do something that you don't expect it to do. And when we say we do not allow, it's up to the person actually using our system what they choose to do. We have different remediation methods. We can, some are as simple as just logging the strange occurrence and somebody can look back at it. Again, question of risk appetite. We can go and send a message to the SOC. We can go and run a user exception routine. We can do a restart. It's all, again, what the risk appetite is of that customer and what they choose to do. But we prevent the problem from happening. We know before the bad thing happens that something bad is about to happen. It's your question. Something bad, something unexpected is about to happen. And it could be a bad thing. It could be a good thing. Your choice. We make no judgment. We're just saying we don't understand this. We've never seen this thing before. What do you want to do about it? And it's your choice. And in a risk-averse environment, in a financial institution, the choice is, restart it because it's a resilient system. It's not going to be seen by the customer. And definitely make a note to the SOC and let's try investigating what this is. Is this some one case that we forgot to add in our test cases? Or is this potentially something bad? Somebody else who's, run fast and break things, they may say, just put a log in there and I don't care if the machine gets pawned because it's no big deal. But it's a question of risk appetite, how you want to do it, and our approach by focusing on what's expected. We don't care whether it's AI-powered, this unexpected thing happened, or human-powered or something. We're preventing the problem from happening to begin with. We don't need any threat feeds. We don't need anything. And there are companies that they see a new 0 day, then they have threat feeds coming in. You had like CrowdStrike has their update they keep on doing. And if that goes wrong, that can be a serious problem. Our system is, there are no threat feeds. There's no link. There's no feedback out of the system giving some new things to us. We don't care. It's up to the person trying to implement this or the company trying to implement this on exactly what they want to be protected and what they want the remediation to be. And if they set it for the most aggressive remediation, they can actually prevent any unexpected behavior by definition, because we have that deterministic auditable model, which seamlessly is created during the deployment phase.
We spoke about the particular benefits in heavily regulated industries. You mentioned finance, but also we spoke previously about kind of enterprise companies and the benefits really afforded to them. Is this a sort of capability reserved specifically for enterprises? Are they who you're targeting largely?
I think we're initially focusing on the people that have the best software hygiene, which tend to be the large enterprises, the financial companies, the regulated companies, pharmaceutical companies. But we honestly believe that this approach it doesn't have to be just sitting at one stage. We believe this can actually change the way software is protected. It can be on an endpoint, Internet of Things. It could be on everything. If one looks at the CVE database, all the different vulnerabilities that have been already exploited, they all tend to say, oh, there was a anomalous behavior, this unexpected behavior, this is what's happening, which causes this, which was not expected. Because nobody's programming for failure unless they're actually doing some kind of malfeasance in your company. And by focusing on what you expect, we're stopping unexpected, which is our approach is we're stopping CVEs, which again is a solution not just for enterprise, but for anyone.
Gotcha. So really the kind of summarizing what you were saying there, that the focus really being in those heavily regulated and the large enterprises just purely because of the cleanliness or the hygiene of the software is going to be more optimal to really kind of benefit.
Exactly. The first choice is the enterprise customers. And again, our tool, our system can be also used in a way to help you drive your test code. Because if you've got minimal test code, we're going to sit there and say in like the captive normal use section, when we know the system is not under attack, we're going to say, okay, this just happened. This just happened. We're learning it because you told us to learn it. But this was never in the test cases. This was never in the test cases. This was never in the test cases. And somebody can actually go and use that with our model explainer to understand, oh, wait a minute, I should actually be doing this as a new test case. I should be doing this as new test cases. And it can actually help them clean up their approach. And again, if they use this in for their development part to make sure their software supply chain and their test cases are complete, the only real guarantee of protection is to have it in runtime, because that's when, if we see something absolutely different, we can sit there and log it or remediate it or say there's a problem here. What do you want to do?
Gotcha. And we've spoken at some length specifically around the kind of the security component of what you're building, but I'd love to, change gears for a second and look specifically at the business outcome side of things and really understand what Predictio AI is enabling from a business and an operations standpoint.
So what we believe we're enabling a new layer of security that's on the runtime, but also there's a supply chain component where as you take your software in, we've heard from customers, we've heard from feedback from customers that they're very worried about doing updates to even open source libraries or third-party libraries where they really don't know what's changed. They say they've got a security update they've got to do, and before they implement it, they want to scan it themselves and verify there's nothing strange happening or strange hidden in the code. And we can actually do that by, in the development side, when they're running their test cases, we can look at that model that we create that we're going to be enforcing in the runtime. And we have a product called the Program Behaviour Model Explainer, which can sit there and say, all right, this is what's happening. Okay, you've got this program, it's opening up these ports, it's listening on these ports, it's reacting in this way, it's writing these files, it's also writing, it's spawning an SSHD shell. And you might sit there and say, wait a minute, this is not what I expect, because that's a new thing. Or it can sit there and say, between version upgrades, it can sit there and say, all right, the old models did this and the new model does this. And the difference between them is actually, we don't see a difference. So you feel safe and comfortable that, okay, this new version I can still deploy because there's no new functionality has been accessed or changed. So I think the approach is that the value is not just in the runtime, but also in the supply chain, in the creating better test cases style of things.
And this isn't your first startup, Stash. So I'd love to kind of draw on your experience. What were the kind of greatest lessons you learned that you're kind of pulling into what you're building now at Predictio AI?
To be fair, every startup starting into it, I think there are going to be certain challenges and problems, but they actually tend to be much different and sometimes even worse than expected. And every single startup, it's got different challenges than what I thought were going to be the challenges. And it's always a learning experience, and it's been very interesting. Initially, with this, I thought people were going to sit there and say, "Wow, this really makes sense. Great, let's run with this." And the big thing was getting people to sit there and say, "Wait a minute, this does sound too good to be true, but okay, we're seeing a demo. For example, on our website, we've got a demo somebody can download, and it shows protection for the ActiveMQ vulnerability with the old version of ActiveMQ, and shows how the training time, I mean, it was, I think, 15 minutes or something of training and use, and suddenly now the system is protected. And you can actually see that you can download it yourself and see this is really real. Yes, it does sound too good to be true, but it's really real. It's kind of different. And that challenge of getting people to see that this is a different approach and that it's actually working was quite interesting at the very beginning.
So looking ahead then, what are the ambitions for Predictio AI, and what do you think the specific kind of milestones you have to hit to achieve those are?
Another very good question. Milestones. Milestones is getting more external validation, and we're working on that with different universities to see how they can help us get that validation that this truly is game changer, along with customers, making sure our end goal is to try to make this an entirely self-serve model. Our initial customers, we've been hand-holding and working with them and making sure that we want to have it so it's a model. So just as somebody types in their program and makes it run, or a command line have a bash file that does something, that they can easily integrate our stuff and it can be transparent. And we believe we're very close to that. That's another milestone. Other than that, it's just head down and make sure this works and scale this and deal with the scaling. I think I see a clear path. It's not going to be easy, and I've got many friends who have also done different startups and gone from nothing to something huge. And everyone, I think, always when it's done, they sit and they go, "Oh, how lucky they are." I don't really believe in that luck. I think everyone makes their own luck, but these people, the people that I've seen that have been very successful, have really truly been hardworking people who put their head down. And even when people say it's nonsense, it's silly, it can't work, or this is stupid, they still go and produce something and manage to make it a success. And I think that's we've had a very interesting 3 years of moving forward and developing and talking to people. And now we're at the stage of actually starting to execute. And we feel very good in that we're on the right path. We're going to get there.
That's great. And I guess as cliche as it sounds, swimming in the blue ocean is always going to be lonely, isn't it? But there's a reason why you're kind of going after this blue ocean opportunity, doing something that's entirely new, entirely novel.
I don't think the loneliness bothers me. Actually, I look at it as a very big advantage in the sense that, yes, we don't have any competitors in this space. We're doing a whole new layer of security. We have an incredible opportunity to help define this new space and grow the space and own the space. And being lonely, we're not lonely. We've got lots of clients and everyone is desperate about security. And we believe we've got a brand new approach to it that's effective and novel and successful, and we can help. And so it's not that lonely. I think it's a good space. We're not, that's the least of my worries.
Good. Great. I'm glad to hear it. And Stash, I guess wrapping up, what's one question I should have asked you that would have helped the listeners get more of an insight into the business or you that I haven't asked but should have done?
That's very interesting. I like always asking, where do you see this 5 years from now, looking back? Where do you see this? For me, that's a great way of solving problems. Is I like to imagine myself in the future and look back and say, how did one get? Where am I, and how did I get there? And I guess my is I would really like this to be a new way of developing software. I'd like this to be a new addition in the arsenal that people have in making software work properly. And in 5 years, I'd be great if this would be kind of a standard of, okay, program behavior intelligence. This is something we need and we use in our software, whether it's something produced by AI or produced by humans or something. We need to understand what the software is expected to be doing and make sure it does just that.
I love that. And that's definitely a much better way of kind of phrasing the question, sort of going forward of where are you going to be in 5 years and how are you going to get there. So, look, Stash, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I mean, I've learned a lot and gained a lot of insight into kind of what you're building. I appreciate you for taking the opportunity to talk to me and the listeners and really explain and unpack what you're doing, what you're achieving, and how you're kind of challenging the status quo and correcting me for the wrong terminology in some instances. Any sort of final things you wanted to leave the listeners with, ways that people can kind of follow you and keep in contact with you and your journey?
Please come to our website for a good idea of what we're actually doing. We've got downloads, demo downloads that you can do. We've got video presentations that people can look at and understand maybe a bit more about what's actually technically going on under the hood. And any people that see this as a new way, we're definitely open to working with people and working with companies and researchers in basically having a new approach to looking at this. I mean, multiple perspectives help you build up a whole picture. And I think that's very, very important. And this is just another perspective on the problem. And we're not saying it's the only perspective, but we believe it has incredible value.
Absolutely love that. And I'll make sure that kind of in the show notes and in around anything that kind of goes out that we've got signposts to you, the business, and some useful kind of resources where people can go and learn more. Once again, Stash, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me and the listeners on the podcast today.
Thank you very much for having us, David.